Really excited about this panel. Really excited to have all you guys up here, some of whom I've only met virtually, and it's good to see them in the flesh. And I think one thing I'd start with is, this is such a broad space, and Tom was sort of talking about that in the prior session. There are so many projects that get described as DePIN, but I realize I'm also skipping over the intro, so let me back up a little bit. So real quick, I'm Rob from Blockchange Ventures. I'm a general partner there. We've done about a dozen, I think, I haven't counted recently, but about a dozen DePIN investments, and that ranges from everything from Fluence to Filecoin to Silencio. So kind of a broad swath across the DePIN space. Right, Anna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna. I'm from DCG. I'm looking into early stage investment, pre-seed, seed. And we definitely share a couple of portfolio companies, I think, with everyone here. And looking forward to this panel today.
Hey guys, my name is Jasper de Maere. I'm the head of research at Outlier Ventures. For those who don't know us, we're a Web3 accelerator. We've been very active in the DePIN space currently, also collaboration with Borderless Capital. Yeah, very excited about what's currently happening.
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to see a lot of people from the DePIN community here. So I'm with Borderless Capital. We've been investing in the, what was considered, maybe not considered DePIN back then, since about 2019. So we're investors in Peak, Render, when it was called Otoy, Helium, and we launched the first DePIN fund, anchored by Telefonica, Jump, OKX, and others in 2021. Made over about 35 or so investments in the space, and yeah, excited to be here on the panel. Great.
Hey guys, it's great to meet everybody. I am not at Witness Chain. I'm the founder of an early stage DePIN firm called Escape Velocity. And we do early stage investing, pre-seed, seed, also have a liquid token fund now. And we also build a lot of public infrastructure in the space to try to help founders kind of get to the network community fit and then product market fit level.
Awesome. So we've got some good overlap, but not too much overlap. So I think we'll get some different perspectives. So the first question, and Jasper, I'm going to have you go last because I'm going to change it a little bit when I ask you the first question. But Mahesh, maybe we'll start with you, and then I'm going to walk it across the panel, which is, there is such diversity to DePIN, right? So they're all unified by this general term of decentralized physical infrastructure. But are there particular attributes within that appeal to you when you're looking to make investments? Or there are certain aspects of DePIN that are more appealing than not, or attributes of teams or whatever?
Absolutely. There's so many, and I'm sure they'll all get hit. I'm going to focus on a couple for now, one that Kyle sort of talked about a little bit, which is this idea of extremely motivated communities that are willing to go the extra mile to actually do something. It's one thing to have 10,000 people in a Discord, but like if someone is actually doing the work to deploy the infrastructure and making it work in a way that is useful and managing it over a couple of months, that's an amazing indication that whatever product the DePIN network is trying to build is something that's going to get a lot of engagement. So something that we really look for when we're investing in early stage DePIN projects is a relationship between the deployer and what it is that he's deploying that we think will stand the test of time and lead to him talking about it, leading to these kinds of things going viral, because a big part of how these DePIN networks end up getting built at the end of the day is viral supply-side growth and word of mouth that comes from the deployers themselves becoming core marketers of the project.
Great, so kind of evangelism. Alpen, how about for you and Borderless?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that DePIN doesn't really explain a whole lot about these networks, and it's kind of like you had to settle on some word. So, I mean, the way we think about it is a couple of different things. So one of the things that we started to kind of circulate is this differentiation between bespoke and commodity DePIN. What I mean by that is there are companies that are customizing hardware, like whether XM or Helium, GeodeNet, and others, that are trying to basically gather precise information about the world, let's say, and they're having people deploy those things, right? They have to purchase those devices, they have to find the supply chains for those, etc. They can potentially be high value add businesses because the data that they're producing is important, it's valued, and there's markets for those. The other side, on the commodity side, is that what we're also realizing is because of that friction of having to deploy devices, acquire them, manage the supply chain, there's the potential to use ubiquitous hardware like phones, laptops, servers, and others to also, either whether it's collect data or it's to do other things, to have other kinds of activity. So we're seeing more networks that are leveraging commodity devices. A couple examples are Silencio that collects, sound data, Ambient, which is collecting location data and also environmental data, Grass, Natix, which is kind of like collecting information about what's happening on the streets, but they're using a phone instead of customized hardware, etc. So I mean, that's one way in which we differentiate the ways people are utilizing devices at scale. And then I think the other piece is like, there are things that we're trying to collect about the world, right? Whether it's like location information, like Wingbits is now growing tremendously. It's one of the companies that we're really excited about collecting flight data. And then there's data about yourself, right? And we're really excited about a company called Kudus with it's basically a decentralized Aura ring. And it's basically information about your health or your activity. You want to keep it private. You also want to be rewarded for any of the data that's being monetized. And I think so there's different types of data. There's different markets for that data. And that's how we started to look at differentiation in the space.
Okay, awesome. So Mahesh talked about the power of the community to evangelize a market. Alpen talked about both the different models where you can be using extent infrastructure that already exists in the space, like a cell phone that people may already have in the case of Natix, or in the case of WeatherXM, who's right here in the second row, a really interesting model of distributing actually unique devices to gather the data. It's always tough when you've already had a couple people answer.
I have one in mind.
Okay, awesome. So take it away.
Especially that we are looking into pre-seed seed, the founding team. I think it's, especially in DePIN, it's very important that on the one hand, you have founders that understand and have deep domain knowledge in that market. But on the other hand, what we see with a lot of teams, that they don't have people who understand crypto, right? You have to understand community building. You have to understand DeFi as well, right? For DEX liquidity, market makers. And that's something which is, like, we haven't seen too many teams that have both, that they are so complementary. So I think that's a very important point to mention here.
I love that notion of you can't just have a team that just knows the Web3, but they actually have to understand the domain that they're looking to do their market in, which certainly is the case of WeatherXM, and I think Silencio just walked into the room, and anyway, there are other here. All right, Jasper, I said I was going to go to you last, and this might be an unfair question, but Outlier, I think you just finished, like within a month or so, of selecting a DePIN focused base camp. That's right, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You guys must have been swamped with projects. How did you filter that? Like, how did you guys figure out the ones that got to join?
Exactly. It's been a super interesting process because once opening the funnel, we have loads of different applications, and it's a very good mapping exercise of what is actually happening in the space. A core observation we saw is if you look at DePIN 5 years ago and you look at DePIN today, initially it was very much about digital infrastructure, your Heliums, your decentralized compute, decentralized storage. That was the initial wave, and now increasingly we're seeing the movement in towards what we call like these data networks, right? So we're moving into a paradigm where people are recognizing that real-time, geographically important data is becoming very valuable, especially like when you can push them into AI models, which obviously everyone is all over about. So the movement there of that trend was a very interesting observation. And then we need to take a stance on this as well. Is like, is this mature enough in case you are able to harvest all of this data? Does it have economic value? What is the total addressable market? Who would you potentially push this to? How close is the business model to monetizing that data? How is it? How important is it? So these are all, I would say, like intrinsic things we would look at. Obviously, also the founders are very important. What's their background? Because I think personally, I also believe that Web3 itself is not necessarily an industry. It is a technology layer which is diffusing across society rapidly and is having an impact on different pockets. In this case, physical infrastructure. So that's the internal thing. And then externally, like obviously, we need to make an assessment as well as how much impact as an accelerator can we have on these teams. Because that's ultimately what we want to do. We want, during the 12-week program, we want to be able to move the needle around the tech stack, go-to-market, potential token launches, which is very important with DePIN, obviously being underpinned by Web3. So these are all assessments we do. So one is very much what is the business model, and the second is how much can we actually move the needle.
Super interesting, because it sounds like you want teams that have done a really good job identifying where they want to go and what they want to be, but you don't want them to be too good because you still want to be able to help them with things like go to market and all that. So I love that. So you mentioned token, and I think it wouldn't be anything touching Web3, and particularly with a bunch of VC, if we didn't talk about tokens. I think what's kind of interesting and what struck me about DePIN is that whereas a lot of Web3 is often the supply side almost over-indexes, right? So you can have a lot of supply and not yet have the demand, and the token can kind of help you kind of bridge that. DePIN, that's not always the case. Like we're seeing markets in balance in some cases, and I think at the risk of sounding heretical, you might almost not need a token. It doesn't need to be token incentivized because there are actually people willing to pay for the supply. But I recognize that's not always the case. At the risk of opening a massive can of worms, are there things that you guys think are particularly key in the tokenomics or the token plan or the token deployment around DePIN projects? And I'm okay if you say, we don't have an hour, so I'm not going to even answer. But if there are things you guys observed, and maybe just Jasper, I'll pick on you since you brought it up first. How do you guys, when you mentioned like we want to find something where the token works, what does that entail from Outlier's perspective?
Yeah, I think DePIN is a very interesting one. If you look at all different pockets, like you have your RWA, you have AI, DePIN sits in that as well. I would argue that it's a business model which is almost defined by its utility token. It's such a pivotal thing within the entire ecosystem from a game tier perspective, an incentivization perspective. So I would say like tokenomics are quite different than last cycle, I'd say. We see like high FDV, low floats type of launches now with like around 10% of free float. A big mechanic we're seeing as well as these token sales, which I think, Oracle sales, node sales, which I think is hugely helpful at raising the initial capital to truly like kickstart the network effect, which is very much needed potentially for production of your hardware, getting the cost curves down there. So it's changing quite a bit. We have an in-house token engineering team as well. We run a lot of models on these, but it's still like, I think ultimately we'll go to a very elegant solution, I think, with a high degree of tailorability in terms of tokenomics. And I feel like that's the transition that's currently being made.
Okay. And Mahesh, you talked about the importance of the community to help drive it. Is a token almost a necessity, or are people willing to evangelize even when there isn't a token behind it?
It's an interesting question. I think at the end of the day, one of the amazing things about DePIN is it's community-powered infrastructure that anybody can improve. Like, it's really an inclusive technology at the end of the day that opens sort of opportunities for tons of people. One of the really interesting aspects of the token, I think, that doesn't get considered enough is how it represents ownership, which is at the end of the day, one of the superpowers of this space is you can build these businesses with random people you never met before and have them do the right things in order to give you what you need to build your protocol. Ownership is such an important aspect in creating a collaborative paradigm that will scale over time. Because, you could obviously, for some of these telecom networks, pay people dollars, stable coins. But at the end of the day, to the point that I was making earlier about community, it's not just the deployment of the device that's kind of what drives the value proposition of communities towards DePIN. It's how they engage with the ideas in the aftermath, how do they evangelize, how they bring other people into the ecosystem. So a really underrated aspect of the token, in my opinion, is the fact that it represents a primitive of ownership.
I love that.
And, in the traditional world, the fact is we've had 100 years of corporations that employ hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people for wage labor. This is a paradigm whereby today you can do a bunch of different things independently, accrue ownership, feel like you're valued by the community, but also have the benefit of liquidity on the other side if you need it. So the ownership primitive of working together with other people and all being paid in a certain way that will accrue more and more value if you keep doing the right things is something that I think is really underrated about the way these businesses are built.
I love that because I think to some degree that was such a founding principle of blockchain, and for a lot of different reasons, meme coins, what have you, we may have kind of lost sight of that. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Alpen, I know you wanted to get in on the token front. So
Yeah, appreciate it. So I think it gets also to the category itself, which is that when we think about what is it that's disruptive about this technology, I think one of the highly rated, high priority kind of innovations is stable coins, right, in the blockchain space. It's the ability to take payments and put them on chain, make them operational 365, 24 hours a day. We have not seen stablecoins necessarily break out and disrupt, the payments industry. I think a lot of us who are in the VC space expect it to at some point, but there are a lot of regulatory aspects to it that are need to be defined still. When I think about other innovation that is at that level, I think about DePIN, right? Which is that you're trying to take a different model to disrupt something that or industries that we're already aware of, whether it's in the telecoms industry, in the mapping industry, in data collection for environmental data, et cetera. And I think that that's why I think it's so compelling to think about this category as much larger than just one category amongst other within Web3 crypto, because the disruptive potential is so massive that it requires a lot more attention, a lot more capital. As far as the importance of tokens, I think one of them is that there is this bootstrapping problem, right? The cold start problem, which tokens can help incentivize, which is that they get people to have or feeling and some potential representation of ownership in these networks at the very outset or at the beginning stages. I think the other part of it, which is really crucial, is embedding financial operations in these networks, right? And not having it as a secondary layer that's tagged on.
Unbundle that a little more. What do you mean by embedding the financial operations in it?
Yeah, so basically, transactions that are happening in a communication network like Helium, right? To the extent that they operate via tokens and there's things that are being automated, there isn't like some third party, there isn't some other externality that you have to deal with in order to ensure that people are getting paid in the right way, or that you can automate transactions, for instance, between machines that are transacting data, and not having that as being an external consideration, but having that as embedded in the way that the networks operate is, I think, the biggest differentiator of, let's say, a Helium network or a WeatherXM network or another type of network versus the traditional methods where all the communication happens and then payments and everything else is treated as this secondary layer.
So it's not just, and this is something you brought up earlier, it's not just that the CapEx structure in a DePIN network is superior, but there's also OpEx advantages because you're not having to have as much. Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily, and I think I would be really cautious about saying the DePIN network or the DePIN model is superior, right? I think that this is where I think
you're on the wrong panel if you want to say that.
I think that one of the things you said, at the beginning of this set of questions was, does it need a token? Aren't there models or aren't there problems that don't need to be solved with a token, et cetera? I think that is crucial, right? So as a VC, that is like one of the first gateway questions is that do we really want to invest in a company that is basically taking something that could be solved without a token and basically trying to wrap it as a crypto project, right? And I think there are lots of challenges with launching a DePIN project. A lot of things have to line up, and whether it comes to the founding team's expertise and their understanding of Web3 and the domain that they're working in, there's a long haul. I mean, anyone who's been in the sector since 2019 or so has seen great speculative growth and then a lot of difficulty and challenges. So I think the point is there are things about these networks that I think at the end of the day we expect to power the next decades of innovation and infrastructure more broadly. So when I look at DePIN, I think about infrastructure.
Can I put words in your mouth? And then I'm going to transition to Anna. Are you sort of saying the business has to work whether there's a token or not? And the token can be an accelerant. It can be a key to kind of some of the points Mahesh was making. It can be a key way to get over, say, the cold start problem. But at the end of the day, there has to be a real business there, and the token supports it versus, I think, again, not to keep picking on meme coins, but it's almost the inverse there, where you're trying to come up with a story as to why there might be value. Am I getting it right?
So I think that we need to have a mature understanding of how these both interoperate. The token part of it is extremely important because it's an underlying kind of primitive of these networks, whether it has to do with ownership or how value is moving across it. At the same time, this isn't a typical crypto quote unquote crypto project.
Totally. Okay, I get it. And I love this point because I think what we have seen sometimes, and VC are often the perpetuators of this, is that we'll get distracted by the token and the tokenomics and lose sight of the business. And if you're actually trying to build a proper DePIN with supply and demand, there's a problem there. All right.
I just wanted to add one point here, which might be obvious by this time, but unfortunately it's not, that many of these funding teams we talk with, especially pre-seed seed stage, the incentive alignments are still too short-termist. So they are not like, they are sending us like the vesting schedule, how they think about it. And we would love to see like founders, like you were talking about, it will take decades, right? So we want to see like that they are planned not just for the next 4 to 6 years, but way longer. And we have seen many projects failing. They did liquidity events before finding product market fit. So we really encourage founders, like to think long-term, longer vesting schedules, and don't launch token too early. So I think that's one of the points that I would definitely watch out when it comes to tokenomics. And besides that, there are like a lot of aspects that we are looking into. I'm not like a tokenomics expert, but I think what we are seeing now also when it comes to emission schedules, for instance, that there shouldn't be like a hardcore formula, but founders should like keep iterating at every month, look at the demand, look at the price, and then keep adjusting that. So that's also another aspect that I would add here. And overall, again, like we are building for the decades, even like those projects that are now like Live Peer, Akash, and all these guys, they have been building it for 7 years, right? And they are just still now like getting tractions and taking off. So we need to think long term, and that's something that we are mostly looking for besides the founding team when we are looking at DePIN projects.
Really, really great point. Okay, I promised I'd save some time for you guys. I'm going to ask a speed round for the four of you, which is, sort of helium gets mentioned every time there's a conversation about DePIN, right? And deservedly so. They're sort of one of the granddaddies in the space. But what's a project that you like or have found interesting that maybe is less well known, and share it with the audience? And you don't have to just pick people who happen to be sitting out there, but I'll start with you this time.
Should I share a portfolio company?
You can. It doesn't have to be, but it can be anything.
I can share one because I think almost everyone on this panel shares that portfolio company. It's Natix. I think you mentioned earlier, and we are really excited about them because on the one hand, they don't require hardware, right? So there is like a low barrier to entry. They're collecting real-time data compared to static data. So it's going to be huge for autonomous driving. And there, again, like we talk a lot about, data labeling, like the whole data AI piece. And there we see a lot of potential. So I think this is like one of the projects that currently we are most excited about.
As a fellow portfolio company,
you're welcome.
How about from your perspective?
Yeah, there's loads to pick from. I think one that I'm very excited about, they're actually outside, is Exabits. Decentralized compute. What attracts me is, and we worked with the founders last year during our Filecoin program, is their deep expertise within the pocket they're trying to disrupt, right? So deep expertise within data centers, very good connection, they're US-based. I think, again, they can pick up the phone to a lot of people, get stuff moving, and I think that's very important, right? Because infrastructure has historically been extremely centralized, so it's a very tight-knit community. Having ins into that space to disrupt it, I think is very valuable. So,
that's great. Alpen?
Sure, yeah, I think I'll bring back the one that I was talking about at the beginning, which is Kudus Ring. I think there's a lot of ways that this type of model could be extremely scalable, where you have the small device that a lot of people now have on them. It's a wearable device. And there's a lot of aspects around innovation in crypto, around privacy preservation, around value transfer, data transfer, that make a lot of sense in a model like this. And I can see this whole category expanding into other types of devices. But I think health, as I mentioned before, there are different data types. And when we talk about data about yourself, with the health data in particular, I think that's an area where I think DePIN could be extremely, extremely valuable. And I think that it's something that we're very interested in right now.
Great. Mahesh?
Maybe not a core DePIN idea. One of the things I'm very excited about is sort of the Web 2 to Web 3 transition of companies like Uber and such that relied on supplier networks, but maybe extract value from them. not necessarily paying those suppliers the right way. We're really excited about a lot of those companies coming to Web3. But the protocol that's interesting in pushing a lot of this forward is called Opacity. It's a zk-TLS platform that makes it very easy for any Web3 application launching to be able to allow Web2 power users to privately verify that they are power users. Very simple platform at the end of the day. It makes it easy for, if you're an Uber user, to bring your Uber rating and history on chain. And then when you have companies like Teleport that launch and such that are driving decentralized Uber type models, you can then target those users in a way that you never could before. You know, one of the things about DePIN that always makes me worried is, you know, you're paying out tokens, you're incentivizing huge amounts of supply. There's not always a ton of thought into how that supply is incentivized. And I think protocols like Opacity that make it more and more easy for users to signal that they are high value themselves will then make it a lot easier for the Web 2 to Web 3 transitions to go after the highest value users in the early days and build really sustainable models.
Awesome. And just because Kyle picked on them indirectly in the last panel, Spexy, which is a drone data company, once you see the data and how much better it is than satellite, and the fact that it's a fraction of the cost, you can get it much more frequently, which matters if you want time series of data. And there are, yes, he's right, there is a human that needs to do something, which is actually have a drone take off. But they have had no problem. There's an absurd number of drones out there that people have nothing to do with. So they're actually really excited to have an excuse. Let's give a round of applause for the panel.
Thank you. Appreciate it.